Well, hey everybody, I'm Sam. I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 22 years. I'm a biblical studies student, Bible teacher. I write on my blog if you want to read that and check that out. It's samburke.org. Go to post and scroll down. You'll find all of my writings there. My training involves biblical studies, theology, biblical languages. So I wanted to get on here to, number one, to say I messed up on my ESV update video about John 1:18. I didn't really do a lot of research in it, and so I misspoke there, and I wanted to correct that, and I wanted to talk about that update because the more I've dove into this update and what they've done with it, I think the more frustrated I've become with what they're doing with it. And I think that's what we're seeing even with a lot of people online is like, this is an interesting take of what you tried to do. Some of their updates are good, but this one is particularly interesting. So what they've tried to do, okay, so the ESV is an update of the RSV and using the critical text to kind of edit and do all of that. And in the critical text, I'll show you this real quick. The critical text, which is basically we found a bunch of manuscripts that are early, and the text tradition of the majority text have been going on for a long time. Then the TR is Erasmus's translation of it into Greek, and that whole tradition, and then. So they're kind of similar, but very different. I think Erasmus takes some of the majority text stuff, some of the other reconstructs his Greek text. But the majority text, we have a ton of manuscripts for, a ton, 17, I think, from the medieval period, the line of the majority text going through there, the traditional. And it read... and reads monogenes in John 1:18. The thing that is questioned, it reads Maha monogenes huios, the only begotten or one and only Son. And in the critical text, we found earlier manuscripts that had John 1 in them. Manuscripts like P66. Like Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, those, and they have in them a version of either monogenes theos or ha monogenes theos, which is the only begotten God or one and only God or the only begotten God, one of those. And so what happened? It was in the 19th century. These two guys, Westcott and Hort, they decided to reconstruct a version of the New Testament based upon what we had plus what we found. And they reconstructed it. It's called the critical text, okay? And that is what a majority of the New Testament parts of our Bibles outside of the King James, the New King James, and translations of the majority text are. All the rest of them are based off of using the critical text as a way to go back and look at and revise the texts on the majority tradition. Or to, in the NIV's case, to just do it from scratch, from, going from the critical text. There's an argument, though, in that variant. Which one is right? When John or whoever wrote the Gospel of John, if it was John himself, when they wrote down the John 1:18, what was written there? Was it ha monogenes huios or was it monogenes theos? Now, the majority text people would probably say that the earlier ones that they found, the reason that they found them was because they were corrupted. They were, they should not have been written the way they were. This is the traditional text. The majority text is the text, and we have so much manuscript evidence that it's game, set, match. The critical text, people would say, no, that's not what happened. What is really going on here is that it has changed over time. This was the earlier reading. What we found is the earliest readings that we have. And over time, these things changed into what is the majority text. And so it's lucky that we found these. It's maybe God's providence we found these, whatever, that we're able to do this. So the difference is, let me show you P66. So P66 is one of the earliest manuscripts of the Gospel of John that we have, outside of, I think, one other. And it clearly, as you can see it, here's a rendering of it. You can clearly see it. I underlined it in red so that I could point it out. It clearly says monogenes theos. Clearly, I mean, if you squint, maybe, but no, it does say that. It says monogenes theos, and that's what one of our oldest manuscripts says. So there's a pretty good argument, and because it doesn't just show up here in this one text, it actually shows up in multiple texts up until a certain point. And so there's a good argument to be made that this maybe was the original rendering, that monogenes theos was, the only begotten God, or, the one and only God was the rendering there in John 1:18. And then it somehow, maybe it got changed and for maybe the sake of clarity, or maybe a scribe was like, that doesn't make sense. Huios makes more sense there, because they would have known only begotten son, and so then maybe they changed it at some point, and then that changed the whole trajectory of the text. And so there is an argument to be made, because it is earlier, and there is more than just one of these. There's a lot of this going on, and by a lot I mean 7 versus 17 in the majority text. Okay. And it's not even consistent within the 7. There's sometimes there's a definite article, sometimes there's not on the front of it. But the point is that there's a lot of argument to be made back and forth in this. It's not like a slam dunk deal one way or another. The ESV has been based, since its inception in 2000, has been based off of the critical text and its corrections or renderings of the RSV and all this kind of stuff. So when they first translated in 2000, they translated it a certain way. And now they're going back and they're updating it and revising it. They've revised all these different things, but it used to say, I'm going to go back to that ESV update page so I can just read what they did, because I think it's interesting. It says, another notable update appears in John 1:18. The only God there, which monogenes theos is what they were using from the critical text, has been updated to God the only Son. And here's why they did this, with God corresponding to theos and only Son to monogenes, as in John 1:14. This translation incorporates the concept of descent, which is an implication of monogenes in context, and maintains concordance with the other occurrences of monogenes in the New Testament. The idea of sonship is evoked by monogenes in the context of father in John 1:18 and John 1:14. The rendering only son for monogenes in several ancient translations of the New Testament for Luke 7:12, 8:42, and Hebrews 11:17 indicates the propriety of a similar rendering in the verses referring to the Son of God. The footnote for John 1:18 has also been revised to reflect more clearly the manuscript variations, including alternative renderings such as the only God who and the only Son, allowing readers to engage with the full textual tradition. I want us to be clear on what they are saying about that footnote. What they're saying about the footnote is we are punting in the footnote, meaning we want you to know that these variants all exist and all of these are valid for us. And which is fine if you want to say it that way. But they are punting. And so what it kind of means they're rendering God the only Son is actually also a punt. I know they're trying to use some wiggle room in how they're translating based upon other things, but monogenes, the only begotten, or the one and only, and then theos, you can't get son from that. It's God. So the only God, or the one and only God, or the only begotten God is the way to translate that if you're going to go with the critical text. If you're going to say we are translating from the majority text, it's ha monogenes huios, the only begotten Son. And I just was kind of getting frustrated with the explanation and trying to figure all this out, because to the average English reader of the ESV Bible who knows nothing of the Greek language, this is going to be really awkward, and it's not going to make sense, and we're not really we're interpreting, we're not translating. And so that's why I was getting a little more frustrated, because I was like, okay, Me as a student of the Greek language, and knowing how these things kind of work together, I'm looking at it and going, okay, I kind of see what they're trying to. They're trying to have your cake and eat it too, with like, hey, one says huios, one says theos. Maybe we can kind of try to incorporate monogenes into this whole thing in the tradition and have it God the only Son and make it work. And I'm like, okay, well, sure, let's make a scholarly argument for that and go back and forth. The normal dude on the street reading the ESV Bible is going to know none of that. They're not going to know that we're trying to engage with all kinds of different textual variants. They're going to think that, wow, you changed it from the only God to the God the only Son. Why would you do that? And it just kind of doesn't make sense. And so I'm now starting to understand why some of the other YouTubers and some of my other friends in the scholarly world are kind of a little frustrated with this update and going, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Pick a lane. Don't try to make everybody happy and then make nobody happy. And so that's kind of where I'm landing too. I'm like, if you're going to do critical text, do critical text. If you're going to do majority text, do majority text. Let's not try to, do somewhere in the middle and frustrate everybody, because it's not word for word. You all of a sudden are leaving the world of formal equivalency and you're walking into the world of functional equivalency, and you're walking into the world of thought for thought. And it's kind of like you're interpreting again. So let's not do that anymore. Let's go back and let's just pick a lane and stick with it. Okay. That's my 2 cents as I engaged more with this content. I would love to hear more of your content, your comments in the comment section. Read them, interact with them on how you took this update and maybe your thoughts on it. Have a great day. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.